looks like we got a pretty good crowd building up here. So thanks for everyone for coming here to our second annual Scary Salary Negotiations. We've assembled a panel of experts here today to help everyone understand that, going to your next salary negotiation doesn't have to be a scary endeavor. We have some experts that can help you with how to get into the process, how to frame yourself, and how to have an effective salary negotiation. So in no particular order, I'll announce the three speakers with a little intro, and then we'll get right to it. So first off, we have Lauren Lefkowitz with 5 is a Trap. She's a fractional chief HR officer for companies under 100 employees in growth or restructuring phases, and she's an executive coach partnering with corporate leaders to support them in overcoming burnout, busyness, and band boundary setting. And fun fact, she's also a certified laughter yoga instructor offering virtual employee wellness sessions. Next, we have Kate Dixon, author of the award-winning Pay Up, Unlocking Insider Secrets for Salary Negotiation, principal and founder of Dixon Consulting, a B Corp certified firm specializing in salary negotiation coaching, compensation strategy, service pricing, and leadership development for organizations from startups to Fortune 100s. With 30 years of experience working with brands like Nike, Intel, American Express, etc., her insights have been featured in Wall Street Journal, Forbes, CNN, and CNBC. She's a sought-after speaker and podcast guest and shares leadership and culture advice at katedixon.org. And finally, Gary Rossi, the triple threat coach, a former Navy SEAL and bomb disposal technician. Gary draws on his elite military background to coach leaders and teams in career management, strategic consulting, and performance excellence. He helps executives build resilience, sharpen leadership skills, and achieve sustained success. Wow. So thank you, everyone, for coming today. And I really appreciate the panel here for your time and expertise. So we'll get right to it. We were talking about, the amount of layoffs happening. It's definitely an employer's market right now as an executive interviewing, trying to find your next role. How do we approach, your interview process, and how do we approach asking for the salary we want when we know that it's a really tight job market? And I'll leave it open. Pretty heavy question.
I can kick us off. My work with clients on the executive coaching side tends to be before we're negotiating. And the name of my company, Fine is a Trap, came from potential clients coming to me and saying, I want this, but here's why I can't have it, and it's fine. And if you come into your job search, your salary negotiation, your interview process with the mentality of what you're willing to give up in order to get a little bit of what you want, that is what you will get. And so I think in this market, I'm sure we'll talk about this whole hour, there's a lot of fear about asking for what you want, but even more, there's fear of understanding what your value is, what you can offer, and what you should be negotiating in the first place. And not saying, well, if I go to another company, if I'm in a bigger pond, I'll have to take a pay cut. That's okay but that's fine because. And stopping that internal monologue where you're telling yourself that your worth goes lower and lower. You have to start by discovering what your value is, what value you bring, what salary you can ask for before you even go in the door to negotiate, so that you can successfully negotiate what you want.
And just to back up what Lauren said, really is identifying your priorities when you're looking for a new position. I mean, I've had executives that all they want in a previous position, they had 5 weeks of PTO, and they wanted the 5 weeks of PTO. And if that affected something else, they were fine with it. They got that five weeks of PTO. I had one gentleman that he was an executive, and he didn't want to travel from Port de Leon, Idaho to Portland, Oregon every day. So he was very satisfied with getting something in Port de Leon. So he didn't travel the time every day. So it's really about priorities and where you are in your life. So I use compensation negotiations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I will tag on, the salary negotiation coaching market has heated up again. And we always have a couple of clients, but it just seems like the floodgates are opening. And I think because folks are feeling a little uncomfortable and, how far should I push it and all of this kind of stuff. Um, and my advice isn't substantively changing in this market to folks because, once you get an offer, the company is telling you they want you to come work for them, right? So, I mean, if you can approach the negotiation in a collaborative manner, be warm and friendly, and don't be a jerk because that's the number one rule, right? Then, I've seen clients get substantial increases from their initial offer in this market in the last 2 weeks. I will tell you that, right? Um, and if you do, as Lauren was talking about, if you kind of self-talk down and down and down, you're not going to be in the right frame of mind and the right attitude to negotiate appropriately.
A devil's advocate though on all of that. You've already been job searching since January, and now it's October. It's been 9, 10 months. So your money's running out. The desperation starts to hit. How do you maintain that like mental resilience? When you're like, I just need a job at this point, right?
Mhm.
So you're willing to ask for less because you can't afford not to close on this job opportunity, right? And they're talking about salary, or they're, but that they also have other candidates they're still talking to that are like, if you ask for too much, there's that fear. What do you recommend to people that are also like, they can't afford to be too tough either because they're like, well, I just need to pay my bills at this point. And there's a lot of people in this situation, right? Job search on average takes 6 to 9 months now for executives. So they probably burned through their savings and whatnot already, you know?
So my big hint is what I call the 7 magic words of salary negotiation. And they are, what kind of flexibility do you have? Right? It's super simple. And for people who aren't comfortable um, taking a more assertive stance, which I recommend for just about everybody anyway, if you can't do that, just do that. Just, hey, the offer is this. I was hoping for a little bit more. What kind of flexibility do you have? And then if they say, oh, we don't have any flexibility, this is our best and final answer, you're done, right?
Yeah.
But, again, I would still advocate for a more assertive stance, even if you are, you got to close it, right? Because again, if you approach it with the right mindset and a collab, you're solving a business problem, right? I think one of the big issues when you get into this scarcity mindset after 9 months of looking for a job and you finally have an offer is that, it's you just can't get out of that, you know,
Yeah.
and um, and the people who are on the other end negotiating with you, they can hear that in your voice. You're solving a business problem. It's not personal. Even though it feels personal, it is not personal. Not personal. It's all about how the company values the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think people can sometimes forget that when they're getting antsy. We've had some exec candidates lately we've talked to that are in the middle of a job search, and it's been a long time for them, and you can see that they're kind of short with you. They're like, "Is there an update? Is there an update?" We've had a few that are reaching out constantly for updates because they're like, "I need to start working like tomorrow," right? And unfortunately, we can't always go by their timeline,
Yeah.
which kind of sucks, but it's just the reality of what it is. What would you say, Gary, as far as mental resilience? When you're in a long job search like this, what do you do to keep tough? I mean,
There's the old thing about mental toughness that we had in the teams.
yeah,
It's establish your goals. What are your goals? Everybody's at a different point in their life. So maybe, I mean, like I'm 69. I have a variety of different financial resources that I tap into. So, financial resources right now are not a big thing for me. But it really is. It's what are your goals? Positive self-talk, like Kate said, it's really about mind over matter. And it's really about capturing your mind and say, okay, this is my number one goal. I'm going to accomplish it. After that, if things are getting and you're at the 8th month, just step back, evaluate, look at what's happening, take a deep breath, relax, take a day off. I mean, a lot of people just go for it and they get burned out just for the job search because job searching is a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last one, start back at your goals. And it is a continuous cycle. Looking at what's done, how is your progress, and working from that.
Yeah, and when we're looking at like progress for job search too, I mean, I think people are expecting immediate results maybe with doing applications and so on, but what we've seen is the amount of applications for online positions, especially remote ones, can be huge. We always tell them, like, listen, if you're applying through the front door with easy apply, there's probably several thousand people also doing that, so you can get lost in the shuffle. What kind of strategies would you all recommend as far as job applications right now? What would be the most effective? And starting from the most effective going down, how would you rank them, let's say, in terms of activity that you'd be doing?
I would say one of the most effective is learning the art of networking. We are, right? We are a society that as we've gotten more and more technology, we've gotten less and less in touch with each other. And COVID took us away from each other in person. But what it did for us was it created an international community, which is also overwhelming. So where do you fit in the networking world? This is especially hard for introverts. And a lot of executives are in naturally introverted positions. A lot of technology folks, financial folks, some HR folks, we tend to be on the back end of the business and we like it there. We like our people. I'm a learned extrovert. I'm a natural introvert. But one of the things that I've learned is to cold reach out to people, not to sell them my services. I don't do it. I won't do it. That's not my style. But to connect with people and say, like, what you do is really interesting. Or I saw that you talked on LinkedIn about this networking group you're in. What is it? There are resources that are free and paid that are networking groups for job seekers. There are ways to connect with people that aren't just blindly doing the easy apply, blindly applying, in the ATS for a position, guessing what the salary is, even though so many states now require in the US the posting of salaries. And really figuring out, how do you stand out? How do you be the hand raiser in the crowd who says, look at me? And it's not about, hey, Kate, can I have a conversation with you and pick your brain about salary negotiations and see if maybe you have some opportunities that I might be able to jump onto. It's, wow, Kate, what you do is really interesting. I never realized talking about money and salary was so important. Where can I find out more information? Are you up for a 15-minute coffee chat? And just building that relationship and building your own personal CRM and being able to know who you've talked to. If I talk to Kate in that way, she might remember me in 2 months. And if she doesn't, and I see an article about salary negotiations, I might email it to her. And it's these little steps, these little pieces where if a position comes up, you might be able to slide in a little bit more quickly. And I think the other thing is that you have to stop talking yourself out of what you're allowed to do. You can build community, you can apply for jobs you don't want because you need pay, you can communicate with people, not like them on a networking call and never talk to them again. You can cut a networking call off early. There are all kinds of ways to communicate with people that you can learn to make yourself feel comfortable in, that get you to those next steps and next steps and next steps.
And Lauren brought up a very good point. It's looking for that connection or that commonality or something to start the conversation. It's about connecting with a person, and especially now on LinkedIn with over 1.5 billion people of subscribers on that platform, and wanting to learn about somebody for not only to learn about them, but being able to share. And it's a 50-50 proposition. And there are so many people that just love to sit in front of a computer and apply online and not reach out and learn more about other people who they can help, as whether as sooner or later they can have. There's an old book, it's quite dated, but it was called about endless referrals. And that was the concept. Constantly meeting people, asking people if you can do anything for them, and building those relationships.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill set that needs to be cultivated. And as an executive, I mean, I think it's kind of important to have those soft skills or at least work on them, right? So that's all helpful. How would you say that you're framing yourself though going into salary negotiation? I know Lauren, you had talked a little bit about this, about how do you frame yourself? How do you set your priorities and do all that? Like, what do you do in preparation? Let's say if you have a meeting on Monday, what would you do this weekend?
I would create a conditions of satisfaction list, which is basically the recipe for what I want in a job. Have to haves, would like to haves, don't care about. So if I don't care if I'm going into an office or working remotely or hybrid or how much I travel, that goes on my doesn't matter list. If I absolutely need the flexibility to pick up a kid at 4 p.m., then having a flexible schedule is my must-have. It's on my must-have list. And Gary, you said it earlier, not everybody prioritizes salary. Some of us are negotiating completely other things. And that's okay. So if salary isn't your top priority, we all have a minimum salary that we need in order to live. But if salary is not your top priority, what is? What do you want to be doing for a living? What is that worth? Go on to the websites, salary.com, pay scale. Look at what your job, when you describe that, what are the titles that match that? What are the salary ranges that seem to match that? And then you have an idea in your head. And when you have that call on Monday, you get to say, what you do is what I'd like to do. Or I've heard this and I have questions about how does this part work of the company, of the job, of the flexibility, so that you can then determine, and Kate said earlier, this is not you, begging for something. This is a business negotiation. And if you were talking about a product or service that wasn't you, all the fear goes away. As executives, it's our job to negotiate. It's our job to hold our vendors accountable, our teams accountable, our coworkers accountable. And then we come to ourselves and we fold inside of ourselves and we get embarrassed that we think we deserve something. So if you have this conditions of satisfaction list and you have this salary range that you know you're worth, even if that call on Monday doesn't go anywhere, you have begun the process of talking out loud about what your value is.
That's all good stuff.
I want to tag into what Lauren said. When we talk about compensation negotiations, I like talking to my clients, my candidates about, okay, it's a 3-tiered approach. What is, and kind of like based off the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what is the salary that is the absolute lowest that you don't infringe on your standard of living for gas, childcare, mortgage, rent, whatever? And very few people, when I ask that question, have no idea what it is. Mm-hmm. And then the next tier is, what is your retirement? Do they have a 401k? How much money would you need to fund those things? And then the third tier is, hey, you got everything set. And then, I usually get a chuckle out of it. okay, what are the toys that you want to buy that you enjoy, whether it's a boat, it's a cottage inn. I live in California, so everybody wants to buy a cottage either in Tahoe or Big Bear. Okay, so where do you want to go and how much is that going to cost? So you have those three tiers, and then you look at what the job's worth. And then you can manipulate or change your desires based upon those two things.
It's all important stuff to consider. I love the idea of thinking about your toys. It's not only about survival, right? We can ask for, we deserve to have nice things if we work hard, right? I think that's another thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Kate, what would you say is the, once we've done our research, we've spent the weekend preparing, and then there we are on Monday morning with the hiring manager. We really want this job. What is your steps of success here in general?
Well, I have a four-part salary negotiation recipe that I always recommend to my clients. And basically the four parts are: number one, express delight, because guess what? The person who you're negotiating with is nervous about this stuff too. So, they want to know that you want to get to a yes. And so by just saying something like, hey, I'm glad that you all think that this is as great of a match as I do, that puts them at ease. And then all of a sudden the emotion goes down in the conversation. The second one is asking questions. This isn't about asking for what you want. This is just to clarify, Gary was talking about, understanding what the 401k looks like or whatever. These should be questions that can't easily be answered by things that the company's already shared with you. So if they've got a benefits package and they've got a booklet for you, read the whole thing. And you'll still probably have questions. And those are the questions that you should ask, probably two or three. And then the third part is what people think that they should start with, but they should not. The third part is making your requests. And so this is where you're going to show them who you are as a leader by being collaborative. You can use your 7 words, you can use other tactics, but you're going to make your requests. And then the fourth part is kind of a dual thing. So one is you want to end on an up note. Daniel Pink says that the end of a conversation is more important than the beginning or the middle. So you want to get this right. And most of the time, folks are going to be negotiating with an HR person. And Lauren, tell me if I'm wrong here, but HR people don't get very many thank yous or kudos. So if you thank them for helping, basically represent your point of view to the hiring manager, thanks for your advocacy and your help in this negotiation. That's the big thing. And then the little codicil on the end of it is figure out when you're going to talk to them next. Because the hardest part of salary negotiation is not number 3, making your requests. It is waiting to hear back when you don't know when you're going to hear back. And so, just saying something like, hey, I know that you've got some information to track down. When's a good time for us to meet again? That's totally appropriate. You're not being a jerk, right? When would be a good time? Oh, Thursday? Oh, on my calendar, I have 9:30 free. Would that be a good time for us to meet? Oh, yes. How about I send you an invitation so that we both have it on our calendars? Boom, done. 1, 2, 3, 4. Express delight, ask questions, make requests, and end on an up note.
And there's definitely being assertive with all of this, right? That's really good to see. So I get that.
But it's not aggressive, and it's not, I mean, this is how you would approach, as Lauren said, this is how you would approach a business problem, right? We all have to do these kinds of things in our work. So show them who you are.
The other thing,
yeah.
The other thing is being proactive, like Kate just said. I've seen so many people that they go through all the way up to compensation negotiation, and they said, I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. And they never schedule that meeting. So they're not being proactive. And then I always have to nudge them saying, well, reach back out and find out when you can meet again. It's just basic between proactivity and reactivity.
Yeah. And sorry, Kate, one of the audience members was asking if you can restate what number 2 was. I think they missed it.
That's ask questions. So this is
Ask questions.
clarifying things. So, it could be something like, hey, I saw in the offer letter that you have a generous 401k program. I didn't see what the match was. Could you share that with me? Right.
Okay.
Or, this talks about a 25% bonus target, which is awesome. And I'm excited about that. How does your bonus program work? When do you typically get payouts? Or when is your fiscal year? Those are things, again, when we talk about the emotional arc of the conversation, these should be things that the person that you're talking with can either answer off the top of their head or probably answer while you're in that call by just, looking things up on the web.
Yeah, the devil's in the details. We've negotiated salaries for executives where we brought on tax attorneys to determine whether the RSU package, how that would hit their tax burden. When is it all vest, right? Is it all at once and you have to take it out and that hits that 1 year where you're in a top bracket and you get a big tax burden? Or is it, over years where you can stagnate it and have a little less taxes by doing it year by year? So there's a lot of different ways to work compensation, and not everyone's an expert. That's the thing. It can be very complicated with all these additional bells and whistles they throw on.
Yeah,
I did have, sorry, go ahead.
Especially for executive packages at large firms and stuff, or in startups. Yeah, you really need somebody to help with some of those things.
Maybe a side question would be for everyone. What does everyone think about getting equity, but getting a lower salary in today's market? What's your initial kind of knee-jerk reaction to hearing that?
We're all smirking.
So,
I think
I
it's
mean,
really
the equity
hard
is
to
not always
say.
worth something, right? It's not
Yeah,
always
I
worth
think it's
something.
really hard to say. Private equity firms have been pulling back on funding, but not eliminating it, right? I mean, the world is still moving. We're dampened down a little bit right now, but the world is still moving. And also, the bounce back takes a while, right? If you think about like the 2008, 2009 crash, it was 2013 or 14 before it felt normal again. And even in the recovery, there were still parts that were not normal. I think if you are going to take equity, this would be my own personal view on it. I think if you are going to take equity, you want to feel really good about knowing what's happening in the company. What are their plans? What is their timeline? What funding have they received? What are their payouts when and if they're bought out or they go public? What is the actual pot of money and how close are they to it? And if they can't answer those questions or won't answer those questions, and this is part of your income, those to me are red flags. I don't think it's a no. There are some clients that I've worked with and where I have considered, well, if I work with them again, I might do an equity pay split or I might do full equity because I've been in the door. But as a fractional HR person, you get to see that. As a candidate, you don't quite get to. So if the company is willing to share why equity is better or part equity is better, and it really makes sense to you and it resonates with you, I think it's worth considering if you can live on the base salary because that equity is not coming to you tomorrow.
Yeah. And don't trust the napkin math, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen a lot of napkin
and don't
math.
trust like hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
Because founders are so passionate about what they're doing. They're so excited about it. And a lot of things have to fall into place and be worked on to get to a point where equity is worth something.
Yeah, and don't trust the napkin math. I mean, they'll put it on, they'll make it look real official and stuff, but it's gambling. I mean, we have to be like really clear that this is gambling. And so, with the advent of PE firms coming in, PE firms exist to harvest value out of the company. And so even if things look all great, if the company takes investment from a PE firm, it's important to know at that point what is happening with your own equity, because I've had plenty of folks that have come to me after they've, they're like, oh, we're going to make so much money because we're selling to, one of the big 5 tech firms. And they had taken private equity and they had basically made everybody else's, the 2 founders got something, but everybody else basically got their equity taken away, and they thought that they were working toward this very big payday. And so, again, if you're okay, if if you can live on the salary, if you can, make things work. And, also one of the best things about startups is you have a lot more agency to do different kinds of things. If you want that, CFO title, and you're a finance person who can grow into that, maybe that's a reality for you in a startup. Or, you want to be able to do, finance and marketing and, something else. You could get those kinds of experiences where you couldn't get them anywhere else. So, that might be the value add for you. And equity, if it pays out, so much better. But you got to make sure that you're winning in the equation without the equity, and just treating the equity like a, super awesome thing that happens if it does.
I like to say either learn or earn, or try to get both if you can, right, in your position. So that's always something to consider for sure. I had some questions for the group. So one question here is, some US states still do allow interviewers to ask about what you're currently making or what you have been paid in the past. How do you handle this question if it is asked?
I recommend that they just focus on their expectations, because, again, there are reasons why, states like Oregon, where I live, don't allow it anymore. But, focus on, what you're aiming to make, and have a really clear understanding what the market is. And, you know, that's what I would recommend.
And the other thing is, not all jobs are created equal. So if you're making something in one and it doesn't really, in that interview process, like Kate said about those questions, and that question comes up, then you got to say you really have to know what the job really entails. Because my other job, yes, the title was such, but I actually did this, this, and this. So that question of what to find out and ask those questions to do some real investigation is helpful in doing that. And, really not answering the question because it really doesn't pertain to the job that you're applying
for. That's true.
I also think your pre-work is important on what you learn about the company. So when you're applying for a position, sometimes the job is, the salary is not listed. You have to put in a salary. That's guesswork. There's not a lot you can do about that piece in the applicant tracking system. But if an organization or company reaches out to you and says, hey, Gary, we'd like to interview you for this position. Can you tell me what your salary requirements are? You have the absolute right to say, I'm happy to, but I need to know more about this position, what the total compensation package looks like. Executives love to hear that you know what a total compensation package is. And I'd be happy to share more when we talk. Can you share what your package looks like? So if you are getting ahead of the question or responding to the question with a question that first time, then again, you're treating it like a business negotiation, right? If you're buying bulk hamburgers and the vendor doesn't tell you how much the hamburgers are per box, you're going to say, like, I'm not giving you a price for these hamburgers. You tell me what they cost. It's the same thing. It is a business interaction. They have a range in their minds, unless they're like 2 people and they have absolutely no idea what anything pays. And then you just go really high. They know what they're willing to pay for this position, or at least the range they're willing to pay. And so if you can ask the questions, and in fact, as an executive, I would not even get on a call, a phone screen, a first interview without knowing what the salary range is. Because if I'm a $300,000 earner or a $500,000 earner, and this job looks big and ritzy, but it's actually paying 150 because that's where they are as a company, it's not worth anybody's time to have the conversation. So as the one half of the business dealing, you have the right and responsibility to find out upfront before the question comes to you. And then you have the opportunity to say, like, different factors in every company, different factors in every job. It's hard for me to tell you how what I've made in the past relates to what this position is offering.
And to tag on to that too, it's something that you can use on the back end when you're actually negotiating, because you usually get those questions while you're in the interview mode. And I've had clients say, oh gosh, I really screwed up because I told them 150. And now that I know what the job is about, it's not a $150,000 job. And besides, the bonus isn't nearly what my bonus was before. So I'm stuck. I don't want to take 150 because things aren't lining up. And you have that conversation on the back end with them. And exactly like Lauren's talking about, hey, now that I know better what the expectations of the company are and what the total rewards package looks like, I need to revise my number a little bit.
How would you sort of counter when, because obviously you go into the negotiation, you know what you're going to ask for, you're using your steps and all that, but then you have, let's say, a pretty aggressive negotiation coming back to you from the company where they say, well, you were only making 125 at your last job, we can give you 10K more, even though so 135, but the job's worth 175. How do you bridge that gap when for them they don't even get it, like they don't get it as a hiring manager. For them, it's just, well, you're making more than you were before, right? How do you overcome that when you're facing that? Because that does happen sometimes. Like in their mind, they're like, well, that's what you were making, that's what you're worth, right? That's the value. And it becomes a leverage thing almost,
That's why you never say what your salary was.
Well, in some cases they're allowed to ask that, right?
Yeah,
In some
but you
states
can
they still
still
are.
dodge it, and uh, uh, if a company is really, really pressing you, and even though you've talked about, these are my requirements, that, my research shows that jobs like these pay between X and Y in the marketplace. If those kinds of things aren't working, they're not really negotiating in good faith, right? They know what their side of the equation looks like, and they're trying to get you to tell them what your side of the equation looks like. You're trying to tell them your side of the equation doesn't look like 125, it looks like 175. But you need to take those cues. They're telling you who they are when they're in
Yeah.
this process, just like you're telling them who you are. And if they're being complete jerks while you're still in the dating phase, watch out.
Yeah, definitely can be a red flag if they are, trying to squeeze you a little too much. But unfortunately, we do see these tactics in the marketplace just because everyone's trying to save burn rate, lower their costs. There's a lot of layoffs going on. It's not always as easy as we'd like it to be, I guess, right?
Yeah, and just one thing to tag on to that. I mean, even if it doesn't have anything to do with your salary history, if they think the job is worth 125, you think it's worth 175, you need that 175 to say yes to the job. That's a mismatch. It's not that you screwed it up. It's not that they screwed it up. It's not like you're, in a two-way battle for the correct number from a market perspective. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
They have a number that is what the value that they place on this work. Again, it's not about you, not about you being worthy of 175. It's that they think that this job is worth 125. And, again, if you are comfortable with 125, even though you think that it should be 175, you got to figure out, what your own math is on that. But it's not a personal failing if they don't want to pay you what you know that you are worth in the marketplace.
It's hard to not take it personally though, as a job seeker, it really is. I mean, we say it, oh, just don't take it personal, but when it's your livelihood and you're getting told a number that's really low, they're like, oh, you don't value what I'm bringing here. Like, it's hard not to take it personal. And I mean, for most people, I think it's gonna be hard to, keep your cool a little bit with that kind of thing going on, right? So, but composure, I think, is also important as an executive period, right? Having that composure. I have another question for the group. And this one doesn't really, it's a general job seeking question they brought up here, but I think we'll open it up maybe to, so they said, what advice would you give new grads with tech degrees? Entry level jobs in tech have disappeared thanks to AI. I would say maybe just open it up to say, what would you do? What would you do right now if your job has been affected by AI in some way, whether it's entry level or mid level? A lot of jobs they're trying to streamline operations and workflows across the board, and I've seen some companies actually backtrack on the AI piece where they're not seeing the efficiencies. So all the doom and gloom with AI, I would say take it with a grain of salt right now. In the future, who knows? But right now, it's not as doom and gloom as maybe you hear in the media. Like, a lot of companies just haven't been able to get it right or see the ROI on this AI spend. But what would you say to these job seekers right now that are, either the existential dread of their jobs or they're being affected directly,
Well, granted, this is anecdotal data, but
Yeah.
just today I had a grad that is a UX developer and she landed. And she was very persistent about what she wanted and what she was looking for. And I mean, like what Lauren said, she networked, she applied online, she reached out to recruiters, she used every avenue to look for this position. And we even talked about like this camera. Okay, this is going to sound kind of corny. Put a little post-it with a smiley face on it, so when you're talking to somebody, you have a big smile on your face. And she says that was the best advice because that expressed to her interviewers her enthusiasm for the position.
Attitude definitely matters for sure.
Attitude, absolutely.
I think when new technology comes to being, typewriters to word processors, etc., we've evolved over the years. And there is always this big scary moment where everybody thinks, oh, computers are taking over. And I'm going to fall behind because I'm not a computer, not even because I'm not skilled in the new technology, but because I'm not a computer. I can remember when WordPerfect was the popular software, and then Microsoft Windows came out, and that whole suite, and people were shifting to Word, and people were saying, I don't need Word, I know WordPerfect. And it became obsolete, and Microsoft, of course, won that game. You saw it with Kodak, you saw it with Nokia, right? They didn't come up with the technology. So now we're in this scary AI phase. A lot of jobs have been put on hold because companies are testing to see if AI can fix everything. Marketing is failing. A lot of IT positions are failing. Some of the HR teams that have been pared down because there are some compliance AI tools that, without the people side of AI, companies will see that they can't just plug into AI, because if you're putting bad data in, it's bad data out. It's just like Wikipedia. And so there's a little bit of a patience game. There's a big learning game. And whether that's through something like LinkedIn Learning or Coursera, or there are a bunch of free resources, tons of videos on YouTube. If you start studying how AI complements your career, then you're learning before these companies realize that their teams are failing because they don't have the support. So when you come in, you can talk about how AI can complement but not take over the job. And B, there are AI companies all over the world that don't only have AI agents doing the jobs. These are companies that are staffing. And if you have a company that is boasting marketing AI and you're a marketing professional, then you start networking with that company so that you can figure out, what does the future of marketing look like? What does the future of whatever your expertise look like, so that you're in it. You're not waiting for them to say like, okay, we're just not making typewriter tape anymore.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, funny story about that. We were talking to an AI sales rep company that makes like AI SDRs and stuff like that, and they themselves are hiring human sales reps. So that kind of for me was telling of how effective AI can be without a human at the wheel. It's just a piece of technology. You can't do it without some human oversight, right? So it's not the doom and gloom maybe we've seen from movies and so on. I think not yet, anyways. We'll see if it gets there, but I think for now we're good, and people are still hiring, right? So makes sense. Just checking here for any other questions from the panel. I don't have any more, but any final thoughts maybe on negotiating salaries in this market? Like, what would you say? Some tips and tricks you would say going in right now for people that are still actively interviewing.
The one thing for job searching is research. If you have an interview, I mean, again, with LinkedIn, I'm not going to say LinkedIn is the end to be all, but if you know who the interviewer is, look at them and research them on LinkedIn. Google search them, the company. There's plenty of resources out there about the company. I don't personally think that enough people do the research before a job interview to learn about all facets of what they are looking at.
How much time would you say researching a company for an interview? Like what kind of prep time would you give, you say, on average? What's a good number?
How important is it to you to land that job?
It's a good measure stick for sure.
And if that person does have an online presence, AI is a great tool to use. I have asked AI about myself, and it is pretty spot on. And down to how much I love Hallmark Christmas movies. I mean, it has got me. And so, your research can be faster if you're willing to start using the more modern tools. I would also say, and Kate, you were talking about this at the beginning, and Gary, you touched on it too. The sort of high-low of salary ranges, of what you're willing to accept, of what fits for you. And in this kind of market, it's okay anytime, but in this kind of market, especially when you're really concerned about that scarcity level, when you're starting to really run out of money, it's okay to take a bridge job. So if you figure out a bridge job is the job you don't necessarily want, but you are going to be good at, and you can do it for 3, 6, 9, 12 months while you're still continuing to look for another job. You can put as much of your all into it in the 40 or fewer hours a week that you're working, and set those boundaries for yourself so that you're not so bogged down in a job you don't even really want, that you have the time to look. And also, if you're a $250,000 executive and you're now saying, okay, I need a minimum of 110 to just be paying my bills, then only look for jobs that are posting the salary ranges, so you're not wasting your time with jobs you know aren't going to pay in that 250 range. Find the jobs that are $100,000 to $125,000. Apply for those, network for those, same methodologies, but you're on a parallel path of jobs that actually fit you and jobs that will get you by for some period of time. And it's okay to go for these jobs that are not paying or not at the level that you know you can be at, but the market is stopping that for now. And it's okay then to move back in to where you know you can be. There's no shame in that. It is the market, it is not you as a candidate.
How do you approach that though when you go to the hiring manager and they're like, "Oh, you're pretty overqualified for this position. How do I know that you're going to stick around?" How do you approach that conversation if you know that, hey, as soon as you find a 300K job, you're out of here, right? Like for sure.
I think there are a lot of ways to handle that. You can talk about, Gary touched on it earlier. You can talk about like what your priorities are. My priority now is to be with a really strong company. I love what you're doing. I love the flexibility. I love the remote first. That really works for my family right now. Um, as we talked about earlier, we're not really telling people what our salaries are. And the COVID and post-COVID world has been like an absolute Wild West. Two jobs that look exactly alike are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars apart.
Yeah.
Well, like
So go ahead, Gary. Yeah.
in the state of California, before January of 2023, if I remember correctly, everybody posted their salaries or didn't post their salaries. So it was a guessing game trying to find it. And then January of 2023 came around and everybody was posting. Some of the postings, 90,000 to 220,000. So you're still dealing with a guessing game. So, I mean, it's really like Lauren said, hey, again, if you're a $250,000 earner and you know what your bottom line is, you have those two paths and use that as a guide.
I'm surprised there's no rules on how big the spread can be, because that's, you can put $1 from $1 to 250. There's a
Yep.
range.
When that law first came into effect, Netflix became famous for posting 50,000 to 500,000 for every
I
job.
remember that posting. Yeah, it was a crazy wage. I think it was up to 1 million, one of these as well, they had posted. So yeah, I mean, they got to tighten up the legislation then, right? It doesn't make sense. The range should be what, 20%, 10%,
It depends
something
on how
reasonable.
wide the ranges are designed to be, because when we put salary structures in for clients, sometimes they do the standard 80% to 120% of a midpoint value, but not all of them do that, right? And some of them have much narrower ranges and some of them have much wider ranges. So, I mean, you can't really legislate it, but it should be, I mean, the spirit of the law, if you read the law, is that they want a realistic hiring range. And, folks are really skirting that with the, even with the 90 to 250, and of course the 50 to 500 is beyond
Yeah.
ridiculous. But I do think that case law will eventually catch up and it'll need to be a little bit more prescriptive, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough when the rules across states are different, right? And we've seen that too on the hiring side, where certain companies won't hire from certain states because of legislation or tax burden or different things that are involved. So it creates barriers to business by having, different rules and so on. So it's, as an HR person, it's a lot of work to be navigating all of that, from salaries to benefits and so on in this market for sure. So it's not easy. Okay, well, I did have one question here from Raymond. He's saying, how do you negotiate flexibility such as hybrid work? Now I apply for hybrid jobs. They're saying 4 days a week with Friday work from home. I'm used to 2-3-2 hybrid environment, or 2 to 3 days in the office currently. So how would you negotiate that as a, like, not salary? We're talking about, sort of your hybrid policies. There is definitely a push for full office return to work, right? How would you approach that?
I think this is a cultural thing with the organization, and I don't see people being able to negotiate a lot of that stuff like they think they should be able to. I mean, anybody who has done fully remote work knows that there's a high likelihood that you're more productive in that kind of situation. But plenty of places want this return to office. And if there's a mandate from the top, you're not going to get around that. But, I have plenty of clients that are remote first and they're like loving it because they're getting their choice of all the best talent. And, I've got one who's a software company and they're like, yeah, bring it on. We love everybody returning to office because then we can get the great people. So I think, again, I think this is one of those cyclical things that the pendulum will swing back. But I just, again, you can ask, and the smaller the company, the more likely you'll be able to do something about it. But in large companies where they've got edicts around return to office, I don't know how successful you can be.
Like it'd be tough too from an employee equity standpoint if they're letting you, have a different sort of work from home option, and then other people are having to be more in office. I've heard that as well from some HR people. Well, the boss wants them 4 days a week. If we give you a pass, then everybody's going to ask for a pass. So
And
it
they'll
can
give
be
you the
hard. You're
pass.
right.
They'll give you the pass to get in the door, and then all of a sudden the rules change. And then, if that's the only reason you're taking this job, that can be a really uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's also, I think, about who has the buying power. It's not a candidate market right now.
Yeah.
When it was a candidate market, there was more of a willingness to negotiate on that and for companies to build policies that were more hybrid or more remote first. And the pullback is, of course, part control, but it's also, every time I post a job, I get 600, 800 applicants. I don't need to tell people they can work from home. We're paying for this property. We're paying for this lease. We may as well make use of it. Or I like to have control. I like to see my people. That's okay in this market. When the market turns so that you post a job and you're lucky if you get 15 or 20 candidates and you're having to do the direct outreach, that's when you have to start pulling back on that. So this is a moment in time, I think, where there is this rigidity.
Yeah, it's just rolling with the punches a bit with the market and what it's going to offer at any one time, right? So
Yeah.
Totally get that. I mean, during COVID, the job offers we were seeing were crazy. The benefits, they were rolling with the red carpet to get a hire, didn't matter what, 100,000 over asking. We saw offers like that. So you got to take the good with the bad, I guess, to a certain extent. But I guess what we learned today really was just being assertive with, researching, being assertive with what you want, and not also going into negotiation, kind of flat-footed and afraid either, which is not a good place to be, right? You got to be empowered with how you approach any kind of negotiation. Any final thoughts before we end here at the top of the hour?
I would say practice out loud. You don't have to have a partner, but it helps if you have a partner. But the words are fundamentally different when they're actually coming out of your mouth than they are when you're practicing in your head. So just, practice what you're going to say. Practice with somebody playing the mean negotiator, somebody being the nice negotiator, just so that you have the opportunity to, put the words in the right order often enough that you're fluent about it.
That makes sense. So some like uh, role playing with your friends and family even, and they don't give me the raise. That would be a fun little dinner conversation for sure. Any other final tips here?
I just came across the book, especially this goes to supporting networking. It's called the 20-minute networking meeting. And the two authors are executive recruiters. They lay out exactly the structure of a 20-minute network and keeping it at 20 minutes. And key points like, hey, asking for a referral. What can I do for you? And then expressing gratitude. And it's a great book. I think it's something that especially everybody should look at when they're in the job search process.
Yeah. I think we have some other books we can recommend as well, right, Kate?
That's right, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I would just say, surround yourself with constructive people. Lots of people are out of work. And if you're just ping-ponging back and forth with a friend who's out of work or a partner who's out of work, that it's terrible. Yes, it's terrible. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So even if you're surrounding yourself with people who are also job seeking, make it an encouraging group of people, make it a group of people that are elevating and lifting each other up, not commiserating.
That's always good advice. Well, we want to thank everyone for being part of our panel today and giving us some good tips we can use right away. Also encourage everyone to reach out to our speakers to learn what they're up to. If they can support you in your job search, it's definitely a community you need when you're looking for work. And with us, we'll be back in December with another event to try to help everyone continue for those that are still working and looking for work. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day. Take care.